has helped your homes dry out. I hope you've been able to get outside and get some fresh air and sunshine and to recover from cabin fever. I know that many of you are still dealing with cleaning out after the flood, and I know it's going to be kind of a tough haul for everybody here. I just wanted to do this video on circular flow today to kind of, again, help everybody keep up or catch up once we start classes, presumably still next Tuesday. What I'm talking about today here is a graphic model that's designed to kind of give a general sense of the operation of the inner works of the United States economy, or any nation's economy for that matter, called the circular flow diagram. There are actually 8 different versions of the circular flow diagram, and most textbooks show a version that looks kind of like this one here. Let me kind of hold this up for y'all for a second here. The problem with this version here, well, is several. The biggest one is it's not detailed enough. Yes, it's got the resource and the goods and services market. It's got the households and has the businesses. I think the households belong on the left and the businesses on the right because we read left to right. And the economy, begins and ends at the households. But there's also, look at all this empty space here in the middle. There's a big player in the U.S. economy. We do not have a pure capitalist economy. We have an impure capitalist economy. And that big player, which gets in the middle of everything, sometimes where we don't want it, is the government. And the government has transactions with the markets, and the government has transactions with households and businesses. So with all respect to Schiller, McConnell, Brew, and Flynn, your model is found wanting. So as a result, when I teach circular flow, I go with one level up. I go with what's called the modified closed version. This version is similar to that basic version I showed you. However, that's a big however, it includes the government and shows transactions. Now, one thing that I told you you're going to need here, and so I'm going to grab this up here. This is kind of a nice generic example, is you're going to need 4 colors of pen or pencil. You're going to need black, which could be a gray pencil if you're dealing with that one. And that's going to be used for doing the structures for households, businesses, the 2 markets, and government. You're going to need red because any transaction that involves a real item, resources, goods, or services is going to have a red arrow. Any transaction that involves money is going to have a green arrow. Now, the thing is, if you're dealing with private sector transactions that involve money or resources, red or green arrows will be labeled red and green. However, if you have money transactions taking place with the government or tangible items being traded with the government, the labels of the red and green arrows will be in blue. And that's to indicate it's a government transaction as opposed to a private sector transaction. So you want to make sure that you have red, green, blue, and either black pen or gray pencil. And you can use colored pencils if you want. I don't recommend crayons. It's hard to write nice, neat with crayons, but colored pencils or colored pens or markers will work okay for this purpose. What some students will do is they'll do this in pencil, and then they'll trace over all the labels and the arrows in red, green, and blue with like a highlighter or a pen, provided it's nice standard red, green, or blue. That will work just fine. So I'm going to be switching over here to screen share because we're going to talk about what's going on here. I'm going to talk about what are the functions of households, businesses, government, and markets first. So let me go to screen share here. And then we have our funny tunnel effect. And so right now, this represents like a standard white sheet of paper. Now I want y'all to notice here that on the left-hand side, we have a rectangle for houses. On the right-hand side, we have a rectangle for businesses. And notice that they are in the center of the left and right-hand side. And please notice space is open here because we need arrows for transactions. Top center, we have an ellipse representing the resource market. Bottom center, we have an ellipse representing goods and services market. Some textbooks will label this product market. I prefer to say goods and services. And then, of course, dead center, I chose to use a pentagon. You could use a block or something else like that, but that's where I put the government, often in the middle of things, sometimes where it's not wanted. Now, the thing is, households play a certain roles, 4 major roles in our economy. Businesses play 4 major roles in our economy. Even if we had a pure capitalist economy, the government would have 2 major roles, but because we have an impure capitalist economy, there are 6 major roles for government. The 2 markets, we're just going to give proper definitions for these because the definitions are going to imply their functionality. But I want to start off with the households first. Households, these represent private citizens like you and me. Households have 4 major functions. Function number 1. main owner of economic resources. Remember, in capitalism, economic resources are privately owned, meaning they're owned by private citizens or by private businesses. But the households are the main owner of the resources: land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. The two human resources, which are labor and entrepreneurship, clearly are owned by the self. A lot of natural resources like mineral rights, timber, and soil rights and whatnot are owned by private citizens or businesses. And similarly, physical capital resources like cash registers, like storefronts, like construction equipment are owned also primarily by households. Second function for households is they are the main consumer of goods and services. Roughly 70% of all the goods and services that are produced and sold are actually consumed personally. They're personal goods and services. And so they are the main or primary consumer of goods and services. Third function for households is households are going to earn income from hiring out resources. Nobody worked for free is a saying a lot of people like to say. And so, of course, if we hire ourselves out as a laborer, if we are an entrepreneur, we expect to get paid for our efforts. Land resources can be paid economic rent, which is still money here. You earn a lease, if you will, if you own land that has oil or minerals that are being harvested. And capital resources, typically the income that's generated by them is divided up over time and treated as a stream of interest payments. But all those resources, households earn income when they hire them out. Last but not least, households are going to spend income on goods and services. That's kind of the way it works. Now, businesses are diametrically opposite. They are, again, along the center line of this page here, and businesses have four functions too. The first function of businesses is they are the main employer of economic resources. Many of us who work in private enterprise are employed by businesses, and a lot of people who we call entrepreneurs will always say, I work for myself. I am self-employed. In addition, businesses make use of raw materials that come from land resources, and businesses make use of the physical capital, the manufactured resources to produce and sell the goods and services. They are mainly employed by businesses. So they're the main employer of economic resources. Second function for businesses is that they use the resources to produce and sell goods and services. Folks, you have to be useful by a business or by your employer to actually produce or sell something practical. And so as a result, they are used by the businesses in this endeavor. Third function for businesses is businesses are going to earn something called revenue, R-E-V-E-N-U-E, revenue from the sale of goods and services. And last but not least, businesses have to pay costs, C-O-S-T-S, costs of employing resources. Remember, nobody works for free. Now, the government. Even if we had a pure capitalist economy, we'd have to include the government in here because the two most important functions of the government are present in a pure capitalist economy. However, there are four additional major functions of the government that it performs in our impure capitalist economy that are kind of part of how they help the economy operate. I want to emphasize here that we've got government sector and private sector, but the thing is, private sector cannot function without the first two functions of government. There are an additional 10 minor functions for government, but we're not going to be concerned with those. I only want you to know the 6 major functions for government. And the number one function for government is to protect private property rights. Class, if we didn't have law enforcement, if we didn't have military, if we didn't have the means like the courts to handle private property disputes and protect people's private property rights, we've got anarchy, and that's not going to work. Free markets cannot work with anarchy, so there's a need for law and order, and the government does provide that. The second function for government is that even in a pure capitalist economy, a government to be effective has to have the funds to operate, and therefore, even in pure capitalism, the government is going to fund, that's F-U-N-D, funds its operations through the collection of taxes. Folks, we see taxes oftentimes as a necessary evil, but taxes pay for police force, taxes pay for infrastructures like roads and waterways and the like. And so in order for the economy to function effectively, the government has to collect taxes. However, if we were leaning towards pure capitalism in the strongest sense that could be, once private property rights are effectively protected, and that's through courts, police, military, and infrastructures, the government's not going to tax any further. Of course, our government does a bit more than that because it's impure capitalism after all. But those two functions have to be there. Otherwise, markets can't work. Now, the 4 additional primary functions of the government in our system. Number 3 is our government provides some public goods and services. A public good or a public service is a good or a service that is provided by the government instead of being provided by free markets. Now, there's several reasons why the government would provide these. One reason why is that free markets either don't provide these goods or services and they're deemed necessary to society functioning, or free markets provide them, but they're not reasonably accessible to most citizens. Some examples might include, but are not limited to, things such as public education, including our college. We are partly funded through taxes, for example, and we supply a necessary service, education, to the general public. Another example would be parks and recreation areas. Folks, if you live in a master plan community, your parks and pools are not public, they are private. And if you don't have proof of residency through like a resident ID card or some kind of pass card, you can't use those parks or can't use those pools unless you are the guest of a resident who is present. However, parks like Memorial Park and Herman Park, which are public, you can drive there, you can park there, you can make use of the facilities there that are accessible to everybody because of property taxes paying for them. So our government provides some public goods and services. Function number 4, our government redistributes income among households. And folks, some of the storm aid that's going to be coming through is an example of an income redistribution. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security disability benefits, Social Security pension benefits. If you pay FICA taxes, like for Social Security, money is taken out of your paycheck and it goes to fund these incomes for other households. These income redistributions sometimes are called entitlements, though I don't necessarily like the term. For those of us who've been paying those taxes, we call them an entitlement because, hey, we've paid, we've supported this. And so this here is something, and please don't mind these pop-ups here. I'm clearing them out as I go. These are examples of taking money from one household and distributing to another. And the thing is, there's all kinds of grousing about it. And the thing is, most people are saying, I got no problem funding somebody's Social Security or Medicaid. If they're a retiree, you got a problem if somebody's trying to scam the system. And that's a reasonable thing to say. And so I think most citizens would say, hey, you know, as long as the person is someone that basically is paid into the system or somebody who is truly in need, yes, let's fund this. We just don't want somebody who's able to take care of themselves that chooses not to. And that's a discussion for a different venue, not this one. Okay, our next function for government is that our government is also going to invest in various businesses through subsidies. If you've heard of special subsidized loan programs such as SBA loans or HUB loans, the government assumes a partial, if not complete, cost of borrowing the interest payments to lenders for these special cases to develop businesses. A lot of technological research and medical research is funded through grants or gifts of money to the researchers, and that helped develop technology and whatnot. Some people say, well, why does the government do this? Well, if some technological device that is developed with government investment actually becomes a profitable private enterprise, they're going to charge corporate income tax in those businesses upwards of nearly 45% these days. And so that's where it makes its money back. Some people say, well, don't some of those businesses fail? Isn't that a waste of government money? My response is private investors will buy shares of stock in companies, and then companies fail and they lose what they've invested. Financial investment in businesses is a risk, but the thing is, the internet was partly developed through government funding. Cell phones were developed as far as the infrastructure through government funding. The telephone was developed partly through government funding. All this investment in these businesses has made profitable businesses, but also it's provided a lot of things we need here. Folks, the space industry is government funded, but a lot of technology that was developed for use by NASA is now stuff that we take advantage of and don't even think about, like Bluetooth, for example. Last but not least, the government serves as a regulator of business and industry. Folks, we've got health regulations, we have got safety regulations, we have got competition regulations, and so forth. A lot of people argue the government regulates too much in some areas and not enough in others, and I won't disagree with either statement. However, we also have seen situations like if you have read the book A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, or if you have read Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, Without regulations, businesses sometimes will do all kinds of harmful things. And so there's no question that regulation is needed. The question that usually is what regulations are enough to ensure that those that need protection are protected within reason, but that business is not encumbered and prevents job creation. Trying to find that sweet spot or happy medium is not easy. But the thing is, I can guarantee you that having some regulation is better than having none by far. And so the question is, what's the right amount of regulation for this to work effectively? Now, for the markets, the resource market and the goods and services market, we learned already in the first lecture, the first video also, that markets are institutions that bring together buyers and sellers. Now, in the resource market, however, the households and businesses don't have the same roles they have in the goods and services market. So let's talk about definitions here. Please don't change the order of the words in the definition because there's a parallel grammatical construct in there. The resource market is where households and businesses trade economic resources in exchange for income. So households are suppliers to the resource market, and businesses are the ones that employ and acquire resources from there. Pardon me. The thing is, these markets here, whether it's the form of want ads or job sites or commodity sites where they're selling stuff or businesses that are selling equipment, this is where households and businesses are trading resources, and households are getting income, businesses are paying costs, but households are suppliers and businesses are acquirers. Now, the goods and services market, the roles are reversed. Definition is this is where businesses and households trade goods and services in exchange for revenue. Businesses are the main producers and sellers of goods and services, and they make them available for sale in the goods and services market, and households buy and consume them. So households are on the demand side of the goods and services market, and businesses are on the supply side. Okay, now it's time to get these pins ready. And if you saw this little nut-shaped device here, this is not supposed to be on your diagram. This device here is specifically what I am using for the sake of my drawings I have to do. And so what I'm about to do here is I'm about to put in some red arrows. So give me a moment to close this thing up here. I'm gonna start drawing red arrows here. And so the first red arrow I'm drawing, let me try to make it a neater looking one here. The first red arrow I am drawing is going from the households to the resource market. And then the second red arrow I'm drawing is going from the resource market to businesses. I want y'all to notice we're going clockwise here. The third red arrow I'm drawing is going from businesses to the goods and services market. And the last red arrow I'm drawing is from the goods and services market into the households. Now I have to add a couple more red arrows. There's one that goes from the resource market into the government, and there's another one that goes from the goods and services market into the government. And so this that you see in here are all the red arrows we're going to need. We're going to put labels on these in a few minutes, but right now I just want to put the arrows in place. Now, I'm going to go ahead and change colors now. I'm going to switch to green arrows, okay? And no, I don't mean Oliver Queen, or for the ladies out there, Stephen and Mel, okay? But I'm going to start with the households again. This time I'm going counterclockwise. And I'm going to put dollar signs on all these green arrows because the green arrows represent money. And so I want you to notice the red arrows that represent the real tangible things on the outer orbits are going clockwise, and the green arrows that represent money are going counterclockwise. Now, we're going to have some green arrows leaving the government. Excuse me, let me get that arrow looking a little bit better. That are going to be going strictly out to the markets. And so let's put those in there as well. Now, I just realized I forgot a couple of red arrows here, but that's okay. You know, I can recover from this here. And so, first of all, I'm going to put some red arrows going out of the government to the households and businesses. And then I'm going to switch and put some green arrows. One set of green arrows on the horizontal axis goes into the government and into the businesses, and for the households and the businesses, pardon me. And there's going to be another green arrow that goes out of the government, okay, into the households and businesses. And so what we have here now is we've got our bunch of flow arrows in here, but now I need to start labeling these things. And so I'm going to make sure, first of all, this is in red, and then I'm going to insert some text, okay? I'm going to insert some text. I'm going to start over here. And this first text I'm inserting is going to be, let me make sure I get this text color here. It's being difficult, but that's okay. We got it fixed here. Okay, so let's close that sucker up. I'm going to label all these exterior red arrows first. We're going to deal with pardon me, the interior arrows at the very end. First red arrow is going to be labeled resources. And so let me see if it'll let me rotate this just a wee bit here. Yeah, there we go. Let's see if it'll let me move it now. That's the second thing I want to do. Okay, there we are here. This is not a perfect science, students, and I appreciate your patience. Households are going to make resources available for employment in the resource market. Now, let's see if it'll let me copy and paste this somewhere here. No, it won't. That's okay. Let me go ahead and insert another text box here. And I really want it to stay there like that here, so close. And then this one here, we're going to also label resources. You see, businesses have to acquire resources and make them and use them to produce and sell goods and services. So let's get that in there, and let's rotate this a wee bit. Okay. And let's move it maybe down just a little bit. There. Okay. Businesses acquire and employ the resources. Now, we're going to insert another text box down here, and this text box here is going to be labeled goods and services. Now, a couple of things I need to say about this one here. Remember, the goods and services are what are coming out from, the businesses. But the thing is, these are being manufactured using the resources that went into the businesses. So I want y'all to see that here clearly. And this is being a little difficult. That's okay. I'll adjust it, try to get into position here. All righty. Last but not least, we got one more red arrow going into the households. That is also goods and services. Pardon my spelling here, folks. I never said I was perfect. Okay. But I'm doing the best I can to get this thing in here just so. All right. Okay, there we go. Okay. So all this stuff that we see here is that households make resources available for employment in the resource market. Firms acquire and employ them. They use them to produce and sell goods and services they make available for sale in the goods and services market, which households then acquire and consume. Now, here's the deal here. This exterior red flow, okay, and let me make this just a wee bit smaller here. New. Again, I apologize. Please be patient with me here as I work with this here. Okay. They won't give me anything in between 48 and 72. Well, you know what? This is still useful here. Okay. Red flow. Okay. Let's move this a little bit further here. Red clockwise is the real flow. Okay, so the red clockwise flow we're seeing here is the real flow. What I'm putting over here at the bottom right is a guide. The real flow, definition for the real flow. This should be in your side notes, like with all the descriptions for the households, government, businesses, and markets. Real flow shows the main path of trade in the economy. Why do we trade? Because we can't make goods and services that are as great as other people can. And so it's better for us to trade with each other. We get more goods and services, we get better quality, and we can engage our time better and stuff we're more productive in. So the real flow shows the main path of trade in the economy. All right. Now we're going to get back to doing our text boxes over here. But this time I got to change the color for that text. We're going with green now here and so forth. I'm going to go back to 72 because I want to make sure this is readable. And let me close this sucker up here. Again, please forgive me for some of my passing commentaries I go through here. We're going to go to the money flow. And actually, that's not where I want to start. I want to start over here. I want to start the households and follow the path. This here is consumer spending. Consumer spending. Folks, the green arrow that we see going out of the households and into the goods and services market is what we call consumer spending. Households spend their income on final goods and services, as we mentioned earlier, and so that's what that's showing, the consumer spending. Now, next I'm going to go over to here, okay, and this next green arrow is labeled revenue. Remember, one of the functions for businesses is businesses earn revenue from the sale of goods and services. Nobody works for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch, we said on the first day of class here. And so businesses are earning revenue or money income that's generated from the sale of goods and services. And that's going from the market into the businesses. Now, going over to here, nobody works for free, remember. And so one of the things we always say with this here is, okay, businesses have to pay the costs of employing resources, and that's what we're seeing down here. This arrow is going to be labeled costs because that's what the businesses are doing here. They are paying the costs of employing labor. They're paying the costs of all the raw materials they use. And then last but not least, where I wanted to start but didn't here, is income. Households earn income from hiring out resources. And so that's what we're seeing over here is the income going into the households, that money going in from all the work we're doing. Okay, now we need to go ahead and label this flow here. And to label that flow, I need to go over here and make this just a little bit smaller so I got space to make it fit. Okay, and so down here, green counterclockwise flow is the money flow. Everything you see there that's on a green arrow is money. Everything you see there on a green arrow is money. All right. And so the thing is here is that the money flow, the definition for the money flow is that it shows financial transactions or money transactions in the private sector. It shows where households are receiving money in exchange for hiring out resources. It shows where businesses are paying the money costs of employing resources and so on down the line. So the money flow is showing all of those currency or there's money transactions, financial transactions. I shouldn't call them financial because that also involves savings and investment, and that's not on here, folks. No savings and investment here. Just to say it shows the currency transactions in the private sector. Now, some of y'all may have noticed I switched my color over to blue on my text box here, and there's a reason for it. We're about to start labeling all this stuff on the interior items here, and it doesn't matter if it's money or if it's something tangible. Red arrow means real tangible things. Green arrow with the dollar signs means money, but these are all going in and out of the government, and so those government transactions, we label those in blue. And so I'm going to start on the horizontal axis here. I'm going to do both of these red arrows here, and I need to shrink this up just a bit so it's easier to read. So again, please bear with me for a moment while I make a size adjustment here. Okay. And so this red arrow here and the same on the other side, we call public goods and services. Public goods and services. We already talked about those a little while ago when we gave the functions of the government. These are goods and services provided by the government rather than by free markets for whatever reasons. Not reserves, services. Excuse me. I'm having one of those brain burps today. Now, the money arrow going into the government, I'm sure everybody already figured it out. That's taxes. Taxes. The Lord giveth, Uncle Sam taketh away. Okay, the government funds its operations through taxes, and so we are labeling this not Texas, taxes. Okay, now the next money arrows going out to the households, we call transfer payments. Welfare, workfare, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security pension, Social Security disability, these are all examples of what we call transfer payments. And we call them that because, well, money is being transferred from one household to the other. Now over here, going to the businesses, those aren't called transfer payments, those are called subsidies. Okay, the government invests in various businesses through subsidies. That was one of its functions that we listed there. And so subsidies are the money going from the government to the businesses as a form of physical investment to develop businesses. Okay, now let's go over here to these red and green arrows going into the government and out of the government from the goods and services market. The government is a large purchaser of goods and services, whether it's military hardware or office supplies. Those are two of the biggest purchases that the government makes from goods and services markets. There's going to be a lot of food and clothing and other types of aid materials being bought from the goods and services market to recover from Hurricane Harvey. Now over here, we've got government spending. Okay, second largest spender in the economy after households is the U.S. federal government, plus the states and the county and the municipal governments there. But our government spends a lot of money in the private sector there. Now, going up here to the top, the red arrow is resources. Our government employs a lot of people, from the president on down to a lowly clerk or buck private in the Army. Those are resources employed by the government. And then over here, we call these budget costs. Our government has to budget how much it's going to spend for various goods, services, and resources. And so when it submits that budget every year and they go through it and typically exceed it, that's where it's spending this over here. Now, all righty, I'm zooming in a little bit because I'm going to put in one more box. I'm going to zoom out again here. Blue, excuse me, what is going on with this here? Let's see here. Blue interior arrows are the Government flow. Okay, the blue interior arrows are the government flow. Definition for the government flow is that it shows transactions between the government and other parts of the economy. We call this the government flow. And so what you see over here that I have produced using my draw program here on Microsoft Surface is I have put together the actual diagram. I have constructed and fully labeled and color-coded the diagram. But as I've been talking, I've been providing the descriptions that have to be itemized separately. I listed the functions for households, businesses, and government. I defined the resource market, the goods and services market. I defined the real flow, the money flow, and the government flow. And this is everything that's being looked for here within, problem number 3 on the handwritten homework. It's covering some major concepts. Now, a couple things I'm going to say before I wrap up. This is not a perpetual motion machine. Much like our city's freeways, you can have a traffic jam start up, some kind of rig jackknifes over here off of Loop 610 and traffic backs up around the Galleria. Other times it flows at or faster than posted speeds. Sometimes the traffic going in and out of downtown is really, really slow. And it's going to probably be a lot slower for the next several weeks because of the damage following Hurricane Harvey. But the thing is, this model here is so great because as Houstonians, this looks like our freeway map. And we understand with freeways, it speeds up, it slows down. Sometimes things get stuck on one side of town, but it starts to work its way to the rest of town if it doesn't get cleared up quickly. And so this is a beautiful visual metaphor for the internal workings of our economy. It doesn't cover everything, though. Like I mentioned earlier, financial markets where people save and financially invest or borrow, and businesses save, financially invest, and borrow, those aren't in this model. Okay, so that's one layer that would make the model too messy to construct. Another layer that's missing is the foreign sector. We don't see the imports or exports. There are some businesses that buy products that are made in foreign goods and services market, and they sell them in the U.S. goods and services market. There are some households that buy products that are made in foreign countries. Some government agencies may outsource things. Some businesses may outsource some of the resources they employ. I'd have to make a three-dimensional model that looks like a cylinder to include foreign governments, households, and businesses, and it becomes just too unwieldy. So please understand, this is not the grand unification model with everything in there. This is just the internal workings. And also there's details lacking. What kinds of goods and services are people buying? Are they buying Doritos and hard liquor? Or are they buying organic fruits and vegetables and things that are healthy? Are these businesses paying incomes that are fair and that people can live on? Are they barely subsistence survival level? The qualitative and quantitative information is covered in other areas and other models. But for what we're trying to do, and that is give you a nice bird's eye view that gives a general sense of the internal workings of the U.S. economy, this does a bang-up job. So, in conclusion, we have covered the circular flow model now. We have constructed it from scratch. And again, I thank everybody for putting up with my little commentaries and erasers and backups and so forth as I've done this. So hopefully this will give you an inkling of how to work problem 3 on the handwritten homework, and hopefully it'll convey a sense of the U.S. economy to you. I will be doing another video probably tomorrow that's going to apply to both micro and macro, which is going to be some of the mathematical models for supply and demand, and I'll be posting links via email to everybody when this happens. I wish you all success. I hope everybody's safe and dry, and hopefully we will still see each other on Tuesday, September 5th. If you are in danger and need help, please check with the Red Cross. Please try to check social media outlets where help is available. I know Lone Star is trying to organize some help for students. I've not heard anything in detail just yet, but we're going to work on it. If you are safe, if you are able to help out at a shelter somewhere else, I encourage you to do so. I helped out at Westside High for a couple of days before they relocated everybody to George R. Brown. I've been running some supplies over to A-Leaf Taylor because that's the side of town I live on to make sure that they're helped as well. We're going to figure this out, students. But my whole purpose in doing these videos here is to help everybody catch up or keep up and not get left behind. That's my intent. I want you students to do well, and I hopefully am being helpful here. You guys can always post in the comments. You have my emails, but I wish you all success and safety, and I hope to see y'all on the week after Labor Day. Take her easy, y'all. Professor Lewis out.